Story 1. Because of the morning after, when you feel like a hollow and anxiety-ridden puddle of a human. I was a fun drunk. Not a fighter, not an angry person, not sloppy, and so on. Making the transition out of alcohol use was hard for my friends and family to understand. It seems people need a big messy explosion to justify sobriety, but my explosion was an implosion. A deep self-hatred that no one felt but my hungover zombie brain. Story 2. Recovering alcoholic here. There was no single incident that made me give it up, but rather a series of mental and physical health problems, combined with family, employer, and financial stresses that made my habit untenable. However, one incident stands as emblematic of those problems. On New Year's Eve going into 2020, I was at a house party with my wife and kids. I drank even more than usual, almost two 26-ounce bottles of whiskey to myself, and shortly after midnight I decided to take a rideshare home. I pieced this story together the day after, because I don't remember much after getting to the party. My daughter, 12 at the time, asked to come with me, so we headed out into the cold and snowy night. I'm Canadian, to meet our ride. Somehow we missed the meeting point, and I was too intoxicated to call another rideshare, so we headed back to the party and got lost. Despite only being about a block away, we wandered for nearly an hour before we finally found the place. My wife was shocked and scared that we were outside for so long, and we engaged in a loud, screaming argument in front of all the other guests, friends, and strangers alike, until the hosts were going to call the police. Finally, my brother-in-law drove me home. The next day, I woke up in an empty house with no recollection of what happened, how I got home, or where my family was. Even though nobody was physically harmed, I know this event has left a lasting negative impression on my kids. I realized, as I reflected, that I could easily have slipped and passed out in the snow and died, and my daughter might have gotten frostbite or, God forbid, even worse. It didn't happen immediately, but that was the trigger for me realizing that I was going to have to do the hard work of quitting. After some pandemic-related setbacks, I'm over 18 months sober. Story 3. Waiting, spotted dinner because the hunt started. Work fell, chasing liquid. Story 4. I had pancreatitis and spent 3 days in the hospital. Oddly, in the 2 weeks leading up to me getting sick, I kept having dreams every night about an African-American man I have never met before. He told me I had to stop because it was killing me. One of the dreams showed me ending up in the hospital, and he said, "This is where you're going to end up if you don't quit." I have been sober for over a year and am not going back. Thanks to the man in the dream for not giving up on me. Story 5. Liver, gallbladder, and pancreas malfunction. Acid reflux and esophageal scarring. Anxiety from withdrawal and hangover. Sleep disruption. Weight gain. Poor decisions. Absence from friends and family. Story 6. I have had a problem my whole life. I am still looking for a way to quit. After a 1.5-year run sober, I am now 44 days sober. I suppose you would call me a well-controlled alcoholic. Story 7. One night I was drunk and was rude to my wife. I quit drinking. I had been married for 25 years and had never treated her that way. I am not an alcoholic and very rarely get drunk, but there I was, behaving badly to the person in my life who deserved it the least. It took a while for my wife to notice that I was consistently not having a beer in the evening. She finally asked if it had anything to do with how I acted that night, and I told her that I would rather not drink alcohol if that was the cause of treating her that way. She started bringing me a beer every night until I finally began accepting them. Her rationale was that she had forgiven me by the next day. She knew I didn't have a drinking problem, and that my actions were just a combination of things happening at the same time when my stress level was highest and my guard was lowest. If she forgave me so quickly, why had I not forgiven myself? Now I enjoy my beer, but if it were to happen again, I probably wouldn't drink. Story 8. It is an addiction for sure, but do you know what is even more addictive? The quality of sleep you get without alcohol and that wonderful feeling of waking up clear-headed and full of energy. Having a clear memory of what was said and done the night before, not feeling the shame of not being able to remember. Story 9. It makes me think very dark thoughts about checking out. It is not worth the risk if a poison like that can subvert my normal happy brain and make me think the world would be better off without me. It also causes a lot of anxiety for the next 2 weeks after drinking. Seriously, it takes about 100 days for your brain chemistry to start balancing out. Try going at least 100 days without alcohol, and I bet you will be shocked at how much better you feel overall even after the fact. Story 10. I quit alcohol a few years ago because I realized I was addicted. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. Story 11. I struggle with alcoholism. I am trying to quit, but the cravings affect me sometimes. I cannot control myself once I have a drink. I become unhinged, unstable, and do not know my limits. Part of me is afraid to stop because it is a wake-up call for my life. I am a self-sabotaging person and am afraid of calmness and being happy. I have gone to meetings before but never consistently. This has been really therapeutic to write out. Story 12. My severe addiction and inability to manage my life while using it caused my downfall. After multiple rehabilitation programs and much pain, I have been sober for some time now, and it is the best decision I have ever made. Story 13. I gave up alcohol after a long life of it killing the friends and family around me. My father, like his father before him, and all of my aunts and uncles were alcoholics. As a young teen, my friends were killed, and some were survivors of a major drinking and driving accident. I became an alcoholic at 19 as a parent of 2. I was in a family where drinking was the norm, so no one batted an eye. Later, when a medical crisis with my partner, who did not drink, led us to be homeless, I became blackout drunk. I lost more of my homeless community to alcohol, liver disease, fights where people bled out, people who lost it all because of alcohol, people I had known years ago who are now permanently impaired from alcohol. I am blessed. I only have a few scars. I found the will to stop before my liver was damaged or I developed diabetes. My community was going to hell, with all the friends I lost as victims and all the times I could have made better choices. All the times I wanted to see one more sunrise myself. That is why I stopped alcohol, and it is worth it. I have been clean for 6 years. Story 14. I was a heavy drinker for years. I woke up with a hangover one morning and was very dizzy. I chalked it up to a sinus infection and went to urgent care for medication. My blood pressure was 240/160. It was a hypertensive crisis. I quit drinking cold turkey that day. I have been almost 3 years sober. I would never go back. Story 15. I quit in 2012 because it was affecting my mind. I did not like the sloppiness. I am done with it for good, and my family still loves me. I am grateful for life. Story 16. Traded it for exercise once my son was born. There is nothing worse than having to wake up at 5:30 a.m. hungover, knowing you can't go back to sleep and have to keep a human alive. Did 1 month sober, felt amazing, and just kept it going from there. I save it for celebrations now. Story 17. Withdrawals. Shaking like a leaf, hallucinating, vomiting while nonstop, crippling anxiety, heart pounding out of my chest, sweating so much my bed sheets get drenched, and not being able to sleep for 5 days. I never want to go through that again. I know if it happens again, I will need to go to the hospital as my body cannot handle another withdrawal. Story 18. I have lost 85 pounds with a lot of hard work. I walk 10 miles a day. Alcohol has too many calories to sacrifice after all of my hard work. Therefore, for weight loss and maintaining it, I choose to give it up. Story 19. 3 weeks sober. I never want to drink again, and here is why. I felt terrible every single day, exhausted all the time, and like a zombie for the first half of every day. It is too easy to make drinking a habit, and it is very hard to quit. Now that I have broken the habit, I do not want to go through that again. Story 20. Dying from liver failure is horrible. I would rather have a heart attack or be hit by a car. Story 21. I always drank very seldom, having beer with dinner occasionally while at a restaurant. Then I started getting beer every time I went to a restaurant. Once I had one at a restaurant that I thought was so good I thought about it often at home, to the point where I really wanted it. At that point, I gave up drinking completely. I know if I keep walking around the edge of that volcano, I will fall in. I cannot do that to my family. Story 22. Passing blood. I do not know what the connection would be to alcohol, but I know I would have to make some serious life changes. Story 23. I decided I wanted to be happy. Healthy living now makes me happy. Eating right, sleeping enough, monitoring my mental health, and no alcohol. I wake up happy and can better manage the difficult times. Story 24. My liver and I have been best friends for the last 23 years, and I still don't know why I tried to harm it. Story 25. What began as a choice and fun had become unpleasant and no longer a choice. Story 26. It is literally poison. When you get drunk, it is because you poisoned yourself. I do not like the way it makes me feel the next day. It is like borrowing happiness from tomorrow. Story 27. I tried and failed many times. What finally worked was having a roommate who was a worse alcoholic than me. He would take food when he was drunk, but then replace it the next day. He was generally kind of a jerk when he was drunk. That ultimately dispelled the little lie I was subconsciously telling myself, that being drunk is a lovable kind of thing, that I was somehow reliving the glory days of attending some pretty epic parties. No, being drunk around sober people is at least annoying and pathetic. That put the final nail in the coffin. It shattered the false identity I had built about my relationship with alcohol. It also helped to have a smartwatch that tracked my sleep so I could objectively see how much worse my sleep was while drunk, how high my heart rate was during sleep, sometimes averaging 100 beats per minute, and how much higher it was during workouts. Story 28. Seeing someone nearly die in the intensive care unit due to alcoholism has deeply affected me. Story 29. I was homeless and friendless. My wife of 18 years left me because I could not quit drinking. My daughter does not talk to me anymore, and my family does not believe me. I was also addicted to methamphetamine and gambling. I was in and out of jail. I was known as the town drunk. My health was failing and I was not working. I slipped into psychosis. Nothing was working. It was the poorest coping mechanism you could ever imagine. I was in absolute total hell. I have been sober for 10.5 months now. I am living in transitional housing. My court dates are over. I am a free man with a job, money in the bank, a few friends, and things are slowly starting to improve. Story 30. I quit after my best friend was admitted to the hospital. He was dying from years of alcohol abuse. We were in the military together. He died weeks later at the age of 53. Story 31. I spent almost 20 years of my life trying to kill myself with alcohol. I had been drinking heavily before that. I grew up with an extremely violent, abusive, and emotionally unavailable father, and come from a long line of angry, violent drinkers on both sides of the family. Being in the late 1980s to early 1990s punk scene, I had plenty of opportunities to act out in settings where not only was it not looked down on, but it was encouraged. However, the drinking really accelerated and went out of control after my breakup with my ex, Jennifer. From there, it was a series of some of the most odious, obnoxious, and criminal drunken behaviors you can imagine. I'm sure somewhere in Northeast Ohio there are still dust-encrusted bench warrants moldering in some court repository for foolish things I did when I was abysmally intoxicated and in one of my monumental self-hating phases. As others in recovery have mentioned, it wasn't one thing that made me finally quit. It was a buildup of factors. The main reason was that I eventually had a son of my own. As he grew, I started seeing myself basically becoming my father with him, history repeating. Self. When I had the epiphany that I was turning into the very monster that had tormented me as a child, and I was repeating that with my own son, I was horrified. I checked myself into a 6-month rehabilitation program and haven't touched a drop since. Now, I want to add something that may not go down well with some, but one of the reasons I stay sober is because of a tool I learned in rehab. My counselor observed that one reason I drank was sometimes out of boredom. He suggested I pick up the hobbies and interests I had before the heavy drinking. And I did. I started gaming again, collecting and building toys, models and prop replicas, voice acting and writing. One of the other interests I re-engaged in was an interest in the paranormal. During one of my little investigations, I had an experience that was extremely personal, direct, and in a form of communication I could not write off as anything other than paranormal. I come from a tech science family. I know what happened. I know what I experienced. That changed me. I did not turn to religion. I still view this as science more than superstition. It is just a branch of science that our culture or society is currently incapable or unwilling to accept at this point in our evolution. But it made me think and realize that all of this is probably bigger and more complicated than we will ever realize. For me, drinking now would be like compounding one illusion with another, a dream within a dream. Take that as you will. Story 32. Original poster trying to sell something here. I just cannot put my finger on it. Oh, I just looked up your website. It was not just a question. It was a sales pitch. Story 33. Benzodiazepines. I was prescribed benzodiazepines at age 14, and strangely no doctor ever told me I could not have alcohol with them. I just intuited that it would be a bad idea, so I have never consumed alcohol. Turns out my intuition was correct. Benzodiazepines and alcohol are quite deadly together. They are chemically similar to alcohol but much more targeted. Bad effects. Story 34. I realized I could drink all night because I love the taste of alcohol. We have people addicted to alcohol in the family. Also, sweating out alcohol to the point of tasting it at the gym is unpleasant. Nowadays, I can have the occasional drink with restraint, but it took a long time, and I still avoid it because it has been so long and I do not want to slip back. Story 35. Not a big drinker to start, but my husband is going into recovery. I would never do anything to sabotage his recovery. Story 36. My death because I would be dead. I rarely drink until I am drunk, but I can really enjoy a good strong Belgian beer such as Duvel, St. Bernardus, Roquefort, Westmalle, and Westfilteren, and a glass of whiskey. I actually hate being drunk. I do not like the loss of control, the dizziness, and I get really tired. So maybe if they can make those beers or whiskeys that taste and feel exactly the same without alcohol in them, I might stop drinking alcohol too. Story 37. The second time I destroyed the front end of my car from drunk driving. Both times involved only me. After paying out of pocket for the repairs again, I do not drink unless I am at my own house and not leaving. That happens about twice a year. Story 38. Dependence, shame, brutal hangovers, the understanding that alcohol is emerging as a class 1 carcinogen, empty calories, suppressing problems rather than solving them, irritability, drunken behavior, self-indulgence at the expense of family and friends, to name a few. Story 39. I'm in my mid-30s, and drinking has completely lost its appeal. I used to drink wine or cider a few times a week. Then one year I decided to do a dry January for New Year's, and that extended for the whole year. I sleep better, I've lost weight, and I don't experience the stomach pains I used to when I drank. Basically, drinking in your 30s is not worth the prolonged hangover. Story 40. I did it. Cocaine would be the answer. Every time I drank, I would hunt out cocaine. Sober for 9 years and counting. Thank God, because fentanyl is scary as all hell. I have no idea how anyone can use certain drugs with the risk of there being fentanyl in them. Story 41. I just passed 21 months sober. I would say the blacking out took a toll. I got increasingly frustrated by having to piece together the weekend and other details. The real trigger was having a family emergency at 10 a.m. on a Saturday while I was already barely managing blackout intoxication. I was barely coherent enough to realize the situation and that family was asking me to come assist. Meanwhile, I knew I would not be able to safely drive until probably the next day. I see people mention hangovers a lot in the comments, but in my opinion, I just got used to being hungover all the time. It was not until I got sober that I realized how bad and sick I was feeling constantly. I just assumed I had a sensitive stomach and morning acid reflux. Story 42. I will probably quit due to health problems it may cause and the strong bitter taste. Story 43. I would give it up immediately if a doctor or other healthcare provider told me to. Also, I had a relative who became really aggressive when drunk. I saw that side of him before I drank alcohol and made a conscious decision that if it affected me like it affected him, I would never touch it again. Thankfully, it did not, and I have managed to have my share without any real consequences. Story 44. Doing foolish things without remembering them is bad enough, but it can also end relationships. Story 45. I quit years ago. Why, you ask? It made my joints hurt so much I could not stand it. I already had arthritis, but since alcohol dehydrates you, it just made my joints worse. Also, it became too expensive. Story 46. I stopped drinking 6 years ago when my fiancée got pregnant because my child deserves the best version of me I can give. Story 47. Having to deal with an abusive alcoholic mother. I will never touch a drop. Story 48. What made me quit was when my partner said I was being abusive. I couldn't see myself hurting others like I have been hurt, and that is unacceptable to me. I was emotionally abusive, talking of suicide, constantly saying negative things about myself, and unintentionally manipulating. Story 49. I have never started. I do not see the appeal. I am already not at my best when I am sober. Why poison my body and reduce my decision-making capacity if I do not have to? Story 50. I already quit 1.5 years ago. I am not an alcoholic, but I realized that drinking was dimming my light. I stopped and have never looked back. Story 51. The hangovers, man. It is a terrible drug to use regularly. Honestly, go smoke some cannabis instead and stop drinking liquid poison. The relapse rate is high. Story 52. The economy. I work in the alcohol industry and I cannot afford this. I am literally producing things I do not have the luxury to say I can buy due to lack of disposable income. Honestly, I am not missing it that much at all. Maybe once a week at most now I make a mixed drink or something. Story 53. I went through a lot of trauma in a 6-month period, from August 2022 through the end of February 2023. I buried 2 grandparents, a friend, my 14-year-old dog, and my 11-year relationship with my wife, who had cheated on me. Additionally, I found out my dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. By the end of the first month, I had begun drinking every day heavily. I had a prescription for additional medication since 5th grade, which I never fully used, so I had a large surplus of Adderall. By noon each day, I would use a 10-milligram dose and take a shot of bourbon. I worked remotely and rarely took time off. I also had to clear out 2 houses in different states to prepare them for the market. Both felt haunted by memories. I did not have time to process what was happening. I was dealing with realtors, contractors, lawyers, and more. The alcohol numbed the pain and kept me moving, but it turned into a year-long bender. Before all that, I was someone who drank a drink or 2 per month. Now, it has been just over a year since I quit. I do not know if this is forever, but I lost control, and I never want to feel that way again. Story 54. I started having flashbacks of abuse from my childhood recently. When I was able to think clearly, as the memories were very traumatic, I decided not to drink anymore. I had not been drinking when I had the flashbacks, but I know my parents were alcoholics and addicts, and that the loss of control was part of how out of control they became. I decided I did not want to lose control over my mind. If there is any genetic component to how abuse manifests, I do not want to hurt my child because I am drunk or high and do not know what I am doing. Story 55. I quit when I realized there was fun without alcohol. I love being sober and remembering everything I say and do. Story 56. A lot of people here are recovering alcoholics and have rightly given it up. I've cut back myself. I'm not an alcoholic, but I enjoy alcohol for the taste. I don't drink to get drunk, and I don't drink things I don't like. I don't enjoy the weight gain or the hangovers, which is why I've cut back. A drink or 2 at most is my limit. Not every day, not even every week. More than a couple, and I can feel it the next day. The beer I like is just empty calories, and I have a hard time balancing from dad bod to just fat bod. I have to watch what I eat and drink and exercise regularly. What would make me quit alcohol? If I could get something that tastes like what I want to drink without the adverse effects of alcohol, I'd drink that instead. But something tells me when synthetic alcohol does come out, I'm going to be Scotty at the bar complaining to Data about synthetic scotch. Story 57. I already have for the following reasons. It is poison. High in calories, which hinders weight loss. Tastes unpleasant. Leads to liver damage. Burns my stomach and worsens my gastroesophageal reflux disease. Causes awful hangovers. Makes me feel sick and nauseous. Causes headaches. Can lead to addiction. Drunk people behave poorly. Expensive. Story 58. I can answer this honestly. I have been a functioning alcoholic for about a decade, blacking out every night and going years without missing a day. Last December, I fell while drunk, which was becoming more common, and suffered an injury that will likely change my everyday life in some way for the rest of my days, even after multiple surgeries. I haven't drank since, and I don't plan to again. It sounds nice, and I miss it, but I tell myself if I were to drink now, the surgeries, money spent, and daily physical therapy for almost a year will have all been for nothing. Story 59. If it were possible to be shown how my life would change, I would have done it immediately. My depression is gone. I make more than double what I did before. I have a great relationship with my partner. My anger troubles are gone. I am approaching 6 years of sobriety. Story 60. My parents never benefited from it. That was enough for me, and I pretty much stopped before it fully began. Story 61. Around 32, I just couldn't stomach alcohol anymore. I used to be able to knock back 5 tequila shots in a single night and wake up ready for work the next morning. Now, if I have one glass of wine, I can feel the hangover starting before the night is over. I also dated an alcoholic in my mid-20s, and watching him drink himself to death was painful. Quelled any urge I had to continue being a barfly. Story 62. I already quit, mostly after living with my alcoholic ex-wife for 3 years prior to divorcing her. Living with the rancid smell of stale alcohol on her body and breath was more than enough, but combined with the abusive behavior toward my children and me, it pushed me over the edge. I ended up raising our 5 children without any help from her following the divorce. Story 63. After the military, I was drinking a 24-pack of beer and a small bottle of whiskey 7 days a week. Almost 9 years of my life were wasted away in a bottle. One day, after blacking out the night before, my then-girlfriend, now wife, looked at me and said, "I don't like who you become when you're drunk." That was in 2016. I haven't had a sip of alcohol since. Story 64. When I learned it makes you fat, unintelligent, and lazy while also causing cancer, I realized the serious health risks. This ignores the long list of other physical and mental ailments it causes. It is a clear choice. Story 65. Forever? Some kind of payment over time. I have already effectively quit. I have had 1 finger of scotch in the last 3 years, but I like having the option. Story 66. Alcohol consistently put me in bad, dangerous, and unhealthy situations. Now, I do not have that. Story 67. I consume infrequently, only when life needs a boost. It really makes me feel good the night of and the day after. I usually do not experience problems like hangovers. Story 68. Try mushrooms. When I tried them, it was the closest I have been to quitting drinking for good. At the very least, I cut my intake by about half. After mushrooms, I felt like drinking gave me a dumb high I no longer preferred. It is not like I replaced drinking with psychedelics. I had mushrooms again a few years later. Story 69. Aside from the physical and mental health implications or any other potential negative consequences, when anything starts to take more from my life than it adds, I quit, or at least give quitting a solid try in the case of addictions. That is pretty much why I have quit. Yes, there is a big element of it being bad for you, but I used it irresponsibly quite a lot of the time and could not see my future self having a good relationship with it in the way some people do. Whether that is the case for those people or they just manage to mask or downplay the negative effects, I do not know. A lot of people who use it irresponsibly stay in that cycle forever and just put up with it. Sorry if I sound preachy or self-righteous here. It is really not my intention. I did enjoy drinking at times, but the lows were lower than the highs were high. Story 70. A health condition that cannot handle alcohol. I drink very moderately, mostly when I want the flavor of a different cocktail or have had an exceptionally bad day at work. If I am at a party, I will have a beer with friends, but it is a small part of my life. I regularly go months without having a drink. You might as well ask me, what would it take to make you give up taffy for the rest of your life? Yes, I like taffy and will have a piece if given the opportunity, but it is no big deal if I never have it again. Story 71. Lost many jobs, many relationships, woke up in jail a few times, and went through a nasty eviction. Not even mentioning the horrible nights I made my friends endure because of my behavior, the disappointment from my friends, family, and myself. Somehow, after all that, I still want to drink. For months sober, and I feel terrible for how I treated people. Story 72. Legalized marijuana in my state. Edited to add. After reading these comments, I will clarify that I do not drink very much to begin with, maybe 2 or 3 times a month. But if marijuana were legal, it would probably be 0. Story 73. It does not have the same impact anymore, so I simply avoid going through that. Story 74. When I started experiencing what I thought were intense muscle cramps on my lower left abdomen, and they kept happening, I then realized, oh, that's my liver. I quit cold turkey right then. Story 75. 1 sip of beer gives me a headache in the morning. I am not sure why, since I drink at least 6 bottles of water daily. Story 76. I knew it was bad. I saw my father dying because of it. I have pretty much avoided any alcohol since I was 16 and started going to the gym. Story 77. I have seen families badly affected by alcohol. I have seen them losing money as well as their family members. That is the reason I do not drink alcohol. Someone who knows about responsible drinking is fine, but I have seen a few people lose control after drinking alcohol, and their friends take advantage of that and take money. Everyone has different opinions. I respect that, but always drink responsibly. Story 78. Migraines occurred every time I had 1 drink. Eventually, I became tired of experiencing migraines 3 or 4 times a week. Story 79. I do not need that as I use other methods to escape boredom, such as cannabis. Story 80. Weed. It made me realize how much I was treating chronic pain with alcohol. After a break, I hated the taste, and it stood out separately in a beer. The other thing is you can be pretty fit while being a big drinker. You just don't realize how much you're capable of when sober. I wouldn't want to be that hindered again. Story 81. I started a new medication last December, and on Christmas Eve, I found out it does not mix well with alcohol. I became very angry and was yelling at my husband when we got home for reasons I do not even remember. He was too upset to talk about it. I do know that I was not even able to wrap my daughter's presents or act as Santa, and that was enough for me to say never again. I have had 1 pina colada while on vacation this year and have not had any other alcoholic drinks since Christmas Eve. I do not miss it at all. I used to be a super fun drunk, but this one experience of not being one scared me, especially because I could not show up for my family the way I wanted to. That was enough for me to say no more. Story 82. Stopped drinking 2 years ago because it made me tired and caused inflammation. I like being active in the mornings, so better sleep and recovery was an easy choice. I made my own herbal blend that has similar, milder effects and does not harm my liver. It helps ease mild social anxiety, so I'm not missing out on much. Also, when you are the person not drinking at parties, you realize that everyone else is too drunk or tipsy to notice your perceived social anxiety. People lose 90% of their powers of observation after 2 to 3 drinks. Story 83. I already have no intentions of going back to it. For reference, I am an avid gym goer and have been an athlete my whole life. Drinking was always fun and enjoyable, but it always, even in my younger years, sidetracked my other interests for days after the actual drinking was over. At a certain point, I found that my goals did not align with alcohol as a hobby or vice. Nothing wrong with it, and I would never judge anyone for loving it. It is just not my thing. That being said, if alcohol and the feeling were relatively short-lived, I would be more interested. But as we all get older, it makes us feel worse for longer. Personally, I would rather use a cannabis pen and smoke. I still get the take a load off after a long day feeling, and within hours I am back to normal. Story 84. Sleep disruption. As I get older, more than one alcoholic beverage messes with my sleep. Sleep is so precious. Story 85. I pretty much have. I did not drink any alcohol until I was 25. I drank on and off for about 2 years, but never enjoyed it. Never once encountered an alcohol that tasted good. When I say I drank on and off for 2 years, I mean, I can count the number of times I drank on both hands over that period. It never gave me a buzz, never made me feel loose or uninhibited. The one time I tried to get drunk, I drank 9 margaritas in one night. My girlfriend had broken up with me earlier that day. I did not get drunk or even slightly tipsy. It did none of the things alcohol was supposed to do for me. I also had no hangover the next day. I have not drunk since then. I see no point. It does not taste good, it does not work on me, and it is expensive. So 25 years without drinking, 2 years of drinking, and now 27 years since I last drank. Other people seem to enjoy it, but it just makes no sense to me. Story 86. This is a resource from the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism about alcohol's effects on the body. Story 87. I quit about a year ago because of who I was slowly becoming when I drank. Not violent or anything, but my anxiety and depression really started to show. I used to work midnight shifts, getting off at 12 or 1 a.m., and I became very comfortable drinking alone, quiet, respectful to my sleeping wife, and self-contained. The second I was in a room with my close friends and had passed the point of no return, I became an emotional wreck just wanting to go home. I never figured out how to get out of that. Quitting was easier than trying to continue. Story 88. I'm not sure. Maybe if a doctor told me I had to. I always tell people that I don't drink enough to quit drinking. I have maybe 1 alcoholic beverage per month on average. Some months none, and others maybe a couple. Story 89. I quit because I did not like being overweight. Is that unusual? Story 90. Nightmares are so powerful and real that sometimes I remember them for months. I usually avoid alcohol, but sometimes have a bit of champagne when there is something great to celebrate. Normally, it is 0 like 350 days per year. I should celebrate more. Story 91. It wouldn't take much for me. I drink wine coolers and good-tasting drinks because friends have tried and failed to get me drunk. Takes a lot to get me buzzed, so I have loosely quit hard liquor and beer because there's no point for me. I don't like beer. I'll drink liquor if it's offered, but I would never buy it because it's expensive and pointless. Story 92. The simple question you must ask yourself is, how long am I going to be chasing the high that is not attainable? That sobers you up quickly. Story 93. In 3 months, I will be waiting for marijuana to clear from my hair sample tests. I am just using alcohol until then. After that, I am good on solo drinking. Story 94. I vomit for 3 or 4 hours in a row if I have more than 1 alcoholic drink. With 1 alcoholic drink, I just get a severe migraine headache for an hour. So no, I do not drink. Story 95. I don't drink alcohol at all because it contains sugar, and I am focused on health and fitness, staying and looking fit. Alcohol does not help. Story 96. Not 1 but 2 exciting adventures in hell with delirium tremens. Story 97. I am a 4.5 year sober alcoholic. What made me quit was a conversation with my sister about my drinking, accepting that I was an alcoholic, a rationalist fanfiction of Terminator. Story 98. I quit after lying to myself and everyone else that I did not drink that much for years. I was gaining weight and my blood pressure was out of control. The final straw was being so drunk that I could not take my dogs for a walk around the block. I fell down, injured my shoulder, and broke my glasses. I have not touched a drop in almost 10 months now. My blood pressure is returning to normal levels. My weight is improving, and I am no longer lying to myself or others about my consumption. Story 99. I didn't quit forever, but I stopped for most of a year after blacking out for the first time. I was sitting at my desk at home, drinking and playing a video game. I got up to use the bathroom, and after taking a few steps, I noticed I was more intoxicated than usual. Then, without any transition, I woke up on the bathroom floor. One moment I was standing in the living room, the next I opened my eyes with my cheek pressed against the tiled floor next to the toilet. I felt very comfortable, as if I just wanted to sleep there. That feeling scared me. I was afraid I would die, so I sat up. Then again, without transition, I woke up in bed the next morning. I have no recollection of anything between those moments of consciousness. It frightened me greatly. Story 100. The hangovers are getting worse. It now takes 2 full days for me to recover, and on the third day, I still do not feel 100% myself. If the hangovers continue to worsen as I get older, I do not see myself drinking in 10 years. Story 101. 50 pounds? It would be easy for me. I like the taste of rum but can easily live without it, and 50 pounds would be nice since you asked. Story 102. If I could see into the future what binge drinking would actually do to my body, my looks, and my long-term health. I have partially quit drinking since last November. I have only consumed alcohol on a total of 5 days since then, and the taste of alcohol has never been appealing to me, but now I really cannot stand it. Except, I love a good Long Island iced tea, where you cannot taste the 4 ounces of alcohol and you get drunk quickly. But to be honest, I feel worse now than when I was drinking 5 to 10 drinks at once a week or so. I do not know what is going on. So that is why I would love to see into the future, to see if what I am doing now would actually be beneficial. Story 103. I got sick of waking up in the morning and glancing out the window to see if my car was in the driveway. I pushed my luck and the people on the road with me way too many times. Abusing alcohol caused me to lose control over how much I drank. After one drink, I was compromised. Story 104. In most areas, including the entire United States, to receive any kind of organ transplant, you must be alcohol-free. Before being placed on the transplant list, you have to commit to abstaining from alcohol and attend classes, even if you have only drunk 1 or 2 times in a year. If I need an organ transplant, I will stop drinking. Death is worse than being sober. Story 105. Better health. I am down to maybe 3 glasses of beer or wine per week. 1 glass every second day, maybe less. Story 106. The intense vomiting. Now, I have some champagne for New Year's or an anniversary, but not again. I like my edible products now. Story 107. Asian flush causes unpleasant symptoms such as an elevated heartbeat, flushed skin, and nausea, making drinking unenjoyable from the start. Story 108. I was immobile for a month after a medication reaction. I am afraid that if I mix alcohol with my medications, it will happen again. Story 109. My kids told me a couple of years ago that I was really drunk the night before, and it was pretty funny. That conversation was lighthearted from their point of view but horrifying from mine. My wife did not share that impression. It was not funny. That conversation was a lot shorter. She was just tired. At the time, I consumed the equivalent of 6 to 9 beers a week. But sometimes, a couple of times a year, I would get blackout drunk. I am down now to a few beers a month and still decreasing. Story 110. It gives me migraines and makes me sleepy, but I am not able to sleep well. Story 111. You do not quit forever. You quit until the day you start again, and then do your best to avoid that happening anytime soon. Story 112. I can handle my alcohol pretty well. I don't get violent and am just happy and content. I have figured out how to get through hangovers. I've gone through phases of drinking 5 or 6 nights a week to not drinking at all for more than 6 months. The hangovers are unpleasant and made my anxiety much worse. What made me realize it wasn't worth it was going through anxiety, weight gain, losing the entire next day to being hungover, and other side effects just to enjoy being intoxicated for maybe 2 or 3 hours. Not a great trade-off. Story 113. If, for whatever reason, I needed to, I am not a heavy drinker. I actually enjoy the taste of alcoholic beverages, and I do not enjoy hangovers or being intoxicated, so I limit my drinking already. Story 114. Better physical health. Better mental health. Better judgment and decision-making. Better quality of life. Story 115. I never drank much. But I was married to someone who drank way too much, and alcohol still makes me think of him and the anxiety of monitoring him, managing him, and making excuses for him. I hope to get past it and enjoy a nice glass of wine someday. Story 116. If it did not enhance the activities I do when I drink alcohol, or if it tasted bad. Story 117. Watching a relative I care about go through a rough 2020 and now be more than 3 years sober is inspiring. She is a role model and idol to me. Because of her, I have not fully quit alcohol, but it is very rare for me to drink ever since. Story 118. mixed alcohol and benzodiazepines, and ended up blacking out in Las Vegas. Scared the then girlfriend, but I did not hurt anybody. It took a couple of years to learn my lesson after that, but it was the beginning of the end of my alcoholism. Story 119. I do not drink. I had a very violent alcoholic stepfather. I also had a friend who had alcohol-induced schizophrenia. Alcohol is a very harmful drug. Story 120. Poor relationship with alcohol. I want to quit every day. Story 121. I just did it a couple of months ago. I finally really sat and thought about why we poison our bodies for fun. I've quit here and there a few times but never stuck. I am finally old enough to see that if every activity you do with your friends is surrounded by drinking, they may not be good friends. Additionally, I went out to a bar with some of my best friends a couple of weekends ago. They drank, I didn't, and we laughed, danced, and had a great time. I've learned through not drinking that friendships that can only survive with drinking aren't good ones to keep. More activities don't require you to ingest poison, and I am not sure why this is so normalized. Story 122. I quit 3 years and 11 months ago. I was an alcoholic for 10 years and had woken up in jail again. This time was for driving on the wrong side of a major highway at 3 a.m. I have not taken a drink since then and feel lucky to be alive and not have hurt anyone. Story 123. It is alcohol. Your body is not able to function if you consume enough. It is literal poison for your organs. There is nothing that is actually good about it. Why put it inside me? Wine I can sort of understand, but not hard liquor. I also bartended for 10 years, and it does not look like something you should be doing a lot. Story 124. Getting older. The older I get, the less appealing drinking becomes. I am 39 and I like to have a drink every now and then, about 1 to 2 every 2 to 3 weeks. I can easily imagine that in 10 years I will have lost all interest in alcohol, and I am actually expecting it. Story 125. Being perpetually pregnant is the only approach that has worked for me in the past. Story 126. Just thinking it through should make anyone quit alcohol forever because it is a foolish choice. Story 127. Waste of money, bad health, trouble managing emotions, damaged relationships, embarrassing moments, weight gain, losing interest in hobbies or fun activities, pooping water constantly, almost getting fired, heartburn. I will stop here. Story 128. What did make me quit alcohol forever was seeing how a large percentage of my family were ruined by drugs and alcohol. The addiction gene runs strongly in my family, and there are much healthier ways to de-stress, like exercise and self-care. Story 129. If someone I loved told me that my drinking was negatively affecting our relationship. Story 130. I quit 4.5 years ago. There were many reasons, but the main one was that after 20 years of heavy drinking, my body was shutting down. I had incredible pain in my torso, likely pancreatitis, and I could not think or remember anything. After a stay in rehabilitation and 2 relapses, I have remained alcohol-free for over 1,600 days and counting. At the time, I despised myself so much that dying would not have bothered me if it meant simply stopping existing, but dying from alcohol-related organ failure is a brutal way to go. I did not want to die that way in extreme pain and brain fog. I was lucky. My liver and pancreas are healthy again, and my mind is regaining its sharpness. Some people reach that stage and still do not stop drinking. Suffering is not enough to make them stop. Knowing they will die is not enough to make them stop. It is a brutal disease. Story 131. For me, I almost died of a stress, alcohol, and diet-induced heart attack. That should do it for most, but not all. Story 132. As of now, I wouldn't quit for anything. I only drink socially, but that schedule is going to change forever starting in May. I am very disciplined with my drinking and don't get drunk. It has been years since that happened, and it never will again. Story 133. I am currently on my 6th beer of the day while I type this. Story 134. Both my parents are alcoholics. Watching them slowly lose everything, die slowly, and abandon my sister and me was enough for me to never want to touch it again. Story 135. Realizing the poison was not worth it, And without drinking, my life suddenly became more than just exhaustion and work. I can have friends, write, and feel very happy. Story 136. Money or a serious health issue. I do not drink very often or very much when I do. It does not affect me poorly. Sometimes I might go months without a drink. It will not affect me if I never drink again, but I have no reason to avoid alcohol either. So I will keep having the occasional drink every now and then until I feel compelled not to. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.